Welcome to the study session where we'll be going over a few different concepts from primarily domain 1. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. Hope you enjoy the stream. Eliciting information is a technique to gather information using social engineering principles from a target. This technique is used with a variety of different methods. Some of the methods we've talked about already, like authority, intimidation, urgency, those can be used when eliciting information. Oftentimes, the attacker will try and elicit information by talking about techniques, talking about different areas of a conversation that don't directly relate to what the attacker is trying to get to. So some of these techniques include false statements. An attacker might make a false statement saying that, this is true. The earth is clearly flat. And then the person on the other end would try and correct them in some manner to put forth their viewpoint, saying, why the attacker is incorrect in their statement. So this could work if you're dealing with an expert or you're dealing with somebody who knows a lot about their topic and wants to always prove that opportunity or show or demonstrate their knowledge. You purposely make false statements. It doesn't have to be as blatant as a large false statement like that. It could be something smaller, like saying like a RAID 10 only provides parity, and then the other person would explain, actually a RAID 10 provides parity and striping and mirroring, or something along those lines. I mean, that's a technique that you can use. You also have bracketing. Bracketing is a way to gain specific information using statements that are specifically crafted for that topic. So you're going to be, you're thinking about these questions in advance, you're thinking about these statements, and you're specially crafting them to get information. So you're talking about, say you want to get some classified information about a specific crypto system. So you would maybe state what the advantages are or the disadvantages are of certain cryptographic systems and have the person correct you or explain things of that nature. Reflective questioning is asking almost like a rhetorical question, a question that's going to get the target to talk. So you're basically encouraging a conversation, you're leading the person on, you're acting like you're very interested in this kind of, so say the person is talking about routing, and they're a routing nerd and they really like their different routing protocols, and they're an advocate for a certain routing technique, and you would ask a question like, well, why would anybody else pick any other routing technique? I don't understand. And the person might say, oh yeah, exactly, those people don't know what they're doing, this is clearly the best technique out there. And so you're kind of edging them on by providing those reflective questions. And active listening is just making it seem like you're very much engaged in a conversation, nodding your head, saying key words, feigning interest, and encouraging the other person to talk. So you're acting like you're very much listening. You might open your eyes a little more, nod your head, lean forward a little bit. All of these different body language techniques can be used with active listening. Okay, pretexting and prepending. These are two terms you're going to see on the Security Plus exam. Pretexting is creating a fictitious scenario to make something more believable. So you're creating a story. Okay, so you might, if you're claiming you're part of an IT team, you're creating a hoax, essentially, because you're masquerading as the IT team. But you can make a pretext of saying, okay, there's a company-wide policy update on endpoints, and we need to access your system to apply that update right away. So you might be pretexting is just creating a scenario. Now, I've touched on some other techniques in there. I've touched on urgency. We need to create this update right away. We're doing spoofing if you're trying to pretend, or you're sending an email pretending to be the IT team. So there's all of these different social engineering techniques. You need to think about them working together. They're not going to be working in a vacuum. But pretexting is creating that fictitious scenario, and prepending is primarily an email technique or a text technique where you would put like an indicator before the text. So sometimes you might see important on a company email. And if a company uses this important line or this important in all caps on an email, then an attacker could pick up on that and use that to make their email seem more legitimate. So they might claim that they're from senior leadership, like a CEO position or the CFO, and send a message off to a junior member to do some sort of act like transfer funds. They might say important, or if you're emailing from inside or outside the organization, some organizations differentiate that with internal or external in brackets. So prepending is adding this little section here, this external, this safe, that important, to that email message or a text message. So, if you normally see messages from Verizon Wireless or T-Mobile, your mobile carrier will have some sort of message or some sort of indicator in the text message saying that the message is coming from that source. Okay, so it might say Verizon mobile message, right, in all caps. An attacker can spoof that message and send you a text message with that same little blurb, Verizon mobile message, in all caps, to make you think it's from Verizon, as another example. So it doesn't have to be with email. Okay, so we're going to keep going through each of these topics. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. We're going to keep rolling here. And basically, I'm using this time to go through as many topics as I can. I might go through some topics more than once, but let me know if you want to hit anything in particular, and I'll pull it up. Smishing is a form of phishing that uses SMS. So if you're texting using an SMS message, that's smishing. That's it. It's just a type of phishing attack. Okay. Oftentimes these will include malicious links. So with multi-factor authentication being so prevalent, often you'll have to log into a website and then that organization will send you a text on your phone asking you to verify a code or something. If in a sophisticated smishing attack, an attacker will time their text to correspond with a login attempt on your behalf. So if they're performing some sort of man-in-the-middle attack and they sniff some packets and they find out that you're trying to authenticate to a certain website or a certain resource, they can then time their text attack, their smishing attack, to correspond with the moment where you pick to do your two-factor authentication. And then there'd be like a malicious link there. Or the attackers might have you input that code in a different website. So that's a more advanced technique. Mostly it's just phishing over SMS. Spam, this is unwanted emails. The I love you worm was a form of spam. It was distributed by email. And it had in the subject line, I love you. So a lot of lonely people fell for that and they clicked on it, or, not necessarily lonely people, but they clicked on the email thinking they had a secret admirer, and all of a sudden they were infected by a worm. That's why, part of the reason why I love you spread so much. And these were in the days when spam messages like this weren't as common. They were still out there, but it's not like today where you have advanced spam filters. It was less common, and the way the I love you worm was set up was that it kind of sparked your curiosity. SPIM is spam over internet messaging, and this is basically using a chat program. Unfortunately, attackers during COVID-19 would use SPIM messages to share malicious links. So they would inform somebody that either them or somebody they had contact with had become infected with COVID-19, and they'd spread malicious links with this. And through that malicious link, attackers would then gain access over the user's mobile device. Pretty malicious type of activity, but hackers don't usually have many scruples depending on the hacking group. Influence campaigns are campaigns designed to influence public opinion. So these are basically social media campaigns, other types of news campaigns. They could be emails. Mostly it's done over social media to alter public opinion, and this could be used to spread disinformation. This could be used to alter political ideology. Basically, it's a way to spread propaganda. Normally, like I said, it's done over social media. And these can be perpetrated through social media campaigns, through fake accounts. Fake social media accounts can be used to perpetrate these influence campaigns. And attackers will, oftentimes these are going to be perpetrated by not necessarily hackers, but state-sponsored agencies. So foreign governments may want to alter an election result in a certain country and then spread misinformation through social media to alter those results or attempt to influence the election. I mean, this happens pretty frequently in any country with major political events. Hybrid warfare is the use of cybersecurity and the use of social media influencing to change or shape social media. So it's very similar to influence campaigns. Hybrid warfare can also refer to using cybersecurity with conventional warfare. So you might use a cybersecurity attack to knock out infrastructure in a certain country, say to knock out power systems, to cause some logistical disarray in a ground force, and then you would follow that up with airstrikes or an attack. So most military branches now include some sort of cybersecurity arm, and they have incorporated that into their strategic plan for engaging other countries, or in the eventuality if there's ever a war, they would use cyber attacks to usually target critical infrastructure, as well as perform traditional or conventional military actions. Identity fraud is when an attacker assumes another identity. And this is when the attacker is stealing personal information like social security numbers, any type of fake. They're using date of birth, any PII, personally identifiable information. Now, there's a U.S. piece of legislation called the Identity Theft Protection Act. And this was enacted in 2005. The Identity Theft Protection Act made it illegal to steal identities. So I'm actually going to pull this up real quick. I'll show you what this looks like. This is the bill itself. This is from congress.gov. So this is a U.S. piece of legislation. And you can read the bill here if you like. It's pretty dry reading. I wouldn't recommend it, but you just need to know that this was enacted in 2005. I mean, you don't necessarily need to know this for the Security Plus test, but good piece of information. So in the U.S., this is illegal. In not all countries, this is illegal, or comes with it significant criminal penalties. In the U.S., it does. So any type of fraud or identity theft is considered identity fraud. And that includes assuming a business name, assuming identity of an individual. And again, the attackers will usually they do identity fraud to then perform some sort of financial fraud, like opening new bank accounts, purchasing like maybe a vehicle, or making large purchases, opening credit cards in the guise of that individual. Now, credential harvesting is a way for attackers to harvest different credentials to trick users into inputting credentials into a malicious website or a twin website, a website that is not the actual website but looks very similar. This can be done with a man-in-the-middle type of attack. And with credential harvesting, attackers usually want to gain access to these credentials to then exploit further resources, maybe create a user account or create an administrative account on a network. Credential harvesting is normally a technique. It can be used in traditional attacks. It can also be used to target individuals with spam messages. So it could be, you could target an organization like Twitter earlier this year had a massive hack where attackers used social engineering principles to gain access to a set of credentials from one of the admins within Twitter. And then they hacked, or they assumed ownership of several types of accounts, like former President Obama, Elon Musk, and they were asking individuals to send Bitcoin to certain addresses. Had the potential to be a very damaging attack, but attackers didn't really follow through with it very well. So it wasn't as damaging as it could be. And actually, I think that was in 2020. But that was a form. Attackers harvested the credentials of a personal an admin in Twitter to perpetrate this type of attack. Invoice scams are when attackers try and trick victims into paying for different services using invoices, like online invoices in particular. So they'll send online invoices to an individual saying that they're going to be providing some sort of service. And the individual thinks they're hiring a reputable person. They'll click and they'll pay for the invoice. And then the attacker never performs the service, never does the job, and they just steal the money or they steal the initial deposit. So with online invoicing, this has become more and more prevalent, unfortunately. And it makes it so that victims have to be very careful. Users have to be very careful about which invoices they trust, which companies they trust when dealing with online invoices. Command and control nodes are those nodes that are used to usually control botnets or to control a backdoor or some type of system that an attacker has installed on a network. So they can be used in two different contexts. Command and control nodes can be used to send information, send commands to botnets. And botnets are a series of bots, series of compromised devices that are all used for one specific task, like to do distributed denial of service attacks or to do crypto mining. Command and control nodes can also control a computer through a backdoor. So once the attacker has opened up a backdoor into a system, the attacker would use command and control to then gain access and send commands to that system. Normally, though, when we talk about command and control, we're talking about controlling botnets. So there's some open source platforms out there that can be used for command and control, including UFONet and low orbit ion cannon. This is probably the most traditional and widely known command and control tool for controlling botnets and conducting distributed denial of service attacks. So command and control orchestrates these types of attacks by sending commands to these botnets so that they all execute the same action at once simultaneously. Now, again, if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat. If you want to go over any specific examples or you want to do like a practical exercise, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling with these concepts. Pups and fileless viruses. Pups are potentially unwanted programs. These are programs that could cause a bog down of RAM or overburden the CPU. They're usually unnecessary, and they often come bundled with some other type of service. Oftentimes, open source software will include a pup. And here's an example of one. This is a search app that it comes with a PDF viewing program. So you install the PDF viewing program, and there's been some type of agreement between that PDF publisher, the PDF viewer publisher, and this search app by ask.com. So ask.com has bundled their software with this cute PDF writer, which means if you don't uncheck this box, you're going to install this browser extension on your Chrome. Oftentimes, these are not necessary, and users have to be diligent when installing certain software that they don't accidentally install potentially unwanted programs. Potentially unwanted programs are not always viruses. They're not always adware. Sometimes they're just annoying. They just are extra, not necessary, but not necessarily malicious. So it's important to make that distinction between a pup and a piece of malware. It's not always malware. A fileless virus is a type of software that it's going to use normally installed and legitimate software to execute its action. So it doesn't need any files or file systems. And the idea here with a fileless virus is it makes it very difficult to detect. Because there's no associated files, it can be difficult to detect with traditional signature-based antivirus. You normally have to detect a fileless virus with a heuristics or behaviorally based antivirus program. So it usually requires a more advanced type of detection technique or a cybersecurity professional analyzing the behavior of certain programs to detect a fileless virus. So if your Microsoft Word is performing actions that it doesn't normally do, it might indicate a fileless virus. Microsoft Office programs are often carriers for fileless viruses. Just because they're so well known, attackers have developed different systems, particularly if you can enable macros within a Microsoft Office application. Let's talk about different password attacks. Spraying is when an attacker has tried to conduct multiple password attacks to as many targets as they can using statistics to help guide their efforts. So basically they're targeting thousands and thousands of accounts, hoping for one or two successes. And this is usually going to be targeting default accounts. So attackers will try default username and passwords for as many accounts as they can touch across the internet. Oftentimes, administrative accounts for different websites will be used, like WordPress is a common target for spraying attacks. Attackers know what the default username and password for a WordPress admin account would be, so they'll just have a bot scan the internet for different WordPress sites, and then they'll perform different spraying attacks trying for those usernames and passwords by default. A lot of times bots are used, a lot of times these are automated processes. So attackers are just hoping for some quick wins. They're not expecting a high success chance, maybe like 0.001% chance of success with a spraying attack, but if they get one, then they can exploit that site further or exploit that resource. It could be used with web applications, anything the attackers can touch. A dictionary attack uses a dictionary to guess the password used for an account. The dictionary is going to have every word essentially like a normal dictionary, but it's also going to have different variations of commonly used passwords. Like anything that's a variation of the word password, like password with $signs for S's, passwords with zeros for O's, password spelled backwards, password with all caps with some numbers at the end. That would be including a dictionary used in a dictionary attack as well. So it's not just a traditional dictionary. It's not like they take Merriam-Webster's dictionary in electronic form and use that as the dictionary attack. There's some other variations with that. Common keyword patterns or word. So oftentimes there's typing patterns that people will use for their password. Like they'll use variation of QWERTY and then the number on top of QWERTY. So it's called keyboard walking, and they'll walk their hand, or they'll hit different keys, like QWERT 1 2 3 4 5, and maybe they'll hold shift a few times in that when creating a password. Attackers are also going to include those types of common finger walking in these dictionaries as well. A rainbow table is a massive list of password hashes. So these are hashes and their corresponding passwords with different hash values. So you would have rainbow tables for like a SHA-256 hash, and you would have a list of hashes that would be and their corresponding plain text. The idea here is if an attacker gains access to a store of password hashes, they would use their rainbow table and search within that rainbow table for that same hash. The rainbow table would show them what the plain text value of that hash would be. Rainbow tables are very large files, multiple gigabytes, upwards of 100 gigabytes depending on the hashing algorithm used and the size of the table. So attackers have to have lots of storage space to use rainbow tables, but they're very useful. They could make an attacker's job very simple if they've captured a bunch of hashes. Maybe not all of the hashes will be in the rainbow table, but they might have a few, and then they could start their exploit. So pretty useful tools for attackers. A brute force attack is just trying any type of combination. All the combinations are tried to determine the attack, and these can be done online or offline. If it's online, you're using the interface that a user would use to log in. Oftentimes, online attacks are stopped by just a basic setting, limiting the number of tries an attacker or a user can do before they're locked out of a system. So if there's that type of setting in an interface, you're going to stop an online brute force attack. But an offline brute force attack is when an attacker has gathered a password hash and they want to determine the value of that hash. They'll start trying, they'll determine what hash value the hash is, and then they'll run every possible combination of numbers, letters, and symbols together until they come up with a match for that hash. And then they'll know the plain text value. And offline attacks can also be done if you're capturing the password as it's in transit through sniffing through or a man-in-the-middle type of attack. Sometimes passwords are stored in plain text, or they're sent over plain text instead of an encrypted channel. So if you're using an HTTP connection instead of HTTPS, your password is sent in plain text, and it can be easy using a sniffing tool like Wireshark to determine what that password is. So encrypting passwords in transit is a very good technique. Physical attacks are attacks that require an attacker to either touch the device to infiltrate the perimeter of an institution or an organization, or to target some sort of supply chain. So to target the keyboard or the USB drives before they even reach the agency. So there's tools like this malicious USB cable, looks just like a USB cable, but includes a keylogger and a wireless transmitter. Okay, so these cables look like a regular USB cable, And this is this type of cable. This one's called the USB Ninja. And here's a product description. You can just buy these online. So here's a product description. USB Ninja is an information security and penetration testing tool. Looks and functions just like a regular USB cable. So it provides power and data transfer. But what it does, it has a wireless remote control to trigger it to start sniffing information, to capturing all of that information, and then it stores it on a micro SD chip on the USB drive. Okay, so this can basically, using this USB cable, you can bypass antivirus, you can make it undetectable by firewall because there's nothing running on the actual machine. It's running on the USB cable. You're capturing everything on the cable itself. You also have malicious flash drives, which will operate just like a regular flash drive, but also sniff keyboard, sniff inputs, sniff file transfers, and maybe store that on a separate storage space within the flash drive itself. So it might make a copy of everything that you put on the flash drive. There's card cloners out there. Card cloners will target RFID cards. So they'll use a wireless sniffer to sniff the credentials of the RFID card and then apply that to a new badge. So in this way you can duplicate already authenticated badges. So that badge is going to come up on the RFID reader as the same badge as the other person. So you might set up one of these RFID sniffers in like a coffee shop nearby an office building, the office building you want to target. Wait for people to go on a coffee break. You have this maybe in a backpack or a briefcase. The sniffer detects these badges as people walk into the coffee shop and leave. Then you go home, you clone these badges, you make new badges. Maybe you've taken some pictures if they have a photo ID, so you've taken pictures of badges, and you make basically an identical badge. If the organization doesn't have pictures on their badges, then you can just take any sort of white badge and put on some identifying features that the company uses. Now you have yourself a badge because you've imprinted the RFID chip on that card with the information you sniffed using your RFID scanner. So then you just use that to authenticate into the building and you're in. So this requires, now a lot of these techniques either require the attacker to be very close to the building or to be within inside the organization's perimeter, so they can be mitigated with physical security controls, and it's pretty risky. So the likelihood of these types of attacks is pretty low, I think, versus normal network attacks or perpetrated over the internet. It's very risky for an attacker or a hacker to expose themselves like this, but they can be used and they have been done. Skimming is when an attacker will steal the information off a magnetic strip of a card, and you'll find skimmers placed at point of sale devices. So maybe at a gas station where you input your credit card to pay for the gas, hackers might put a skimmer over top, and it's going to look just like this. It's going to be indistinguishable a lot of times, and it's going to fit right over the normal slot where you'd put in your card. And it's just, to a normal eye, it's going to look like the slot is a little bigger than normal, but not by much. So attackers are basically reading that magnetic strip as it goes in and out. And that allows them to steal the credit card information, then start making online purchases. And oftentimes the owners of these point of sale devices don't know that a skimmer has been installed. It can also be installed on ATMs. So they have no idea. So the gas station I use as my example might have no idea that skimmers were installed on their pumps. So just another type of attack you have to take a look or keep an eye out for. Okay, I'm going to wrap up the stream now, but thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're interested in one of our trainings or live training boot camps, you can email info@cybercrafttraining.com. Drop me a line. I'd be happy to tell you more about it. We also have self-paced classes, and we offer all all certifications, CompTIA, ISC squared, or ISACA. We have our senior instructors standing by. Our instructor staff is very highly qualified, lots of experience with them. I don't have any junior instructors on staff right now, so if you're looking for some live training, I definitely recommend you check out some of our courses. But thanks for joining me for this stream. I hope you're doing great. If you check out our website for some more live resources, some free resources for Security Plus, but